Hey guys, and welcome! Today we're diving into a fun and rewarding project, sewing your very own custom bikini top. So with that in mind, let's get started! So first off, let's look through the equipment we'll need for this. We'll need something that we can cut the fabric with. We'll also need a fabric de-stitcher, just in case our stitches go wrong. We'll need a needle and thread. We'll need some chalk or a pencil that you can mark the fabric with. We'll need a loop turner. Of course, we'll need some fabric. And we're also going to need some pins or clips to keep our fabric together. Then optionally, we'll need elastic or swimwear elastic, you pick. You could just use elastic here, but if you're wanting something a little bit more, you can get an eyelet maker. These are great. Next up, we need to consider fabrics. So for me, I like to use 2 different colours because it just makes it a little bit easier to work out what you're doing. But you're more than welcome to use the same colour for all the parts. It just makes it a little bit more complicated when you're doing things back to back or right sides together. So for this piece, you'll need 4 cups. Then what you'll need next is 2 straps long enough to go from the top of your cup round your neck and tie. Next up, we'll need the waist tie. That needs to be long enough that it can go through 4 eyelets and tie at the back. Then we'll need the waist as shown, and then we'll need 2 small squares where we can put the eyelets. Okay, so let's get started with the fun stuff. On your 4 cups, what you need to do is pin the right sides together so that we're closing that triangle at the bottom of the cup. Then we're going to sew a line where we've pinned on each one. And don't forget to backstitch. Backstitching is really important. Once we've finished stitching, open them up and make sure you're happy with how they look. They should have a little point in the middle. Then put right sides together and pin on either side and one at the top, making sure to line up the fabric as you go. Once you've done that, take the top strap, fold right sides together and add elastic. Once you've finished sewing, use your loop turner, pulling the fabric through and making sure the straps are right sides outwards. Make sure they look okay and repeat for both. Once you've finished that, add the straps to the middle of the cup and pin in place. At this point you need to sew both lengths of the cup and across the top, and you can add elastic if you want. This just helps the bikini stay stable for longer periods of time. Once we've done that, bring it so it's right sides facing out and look at your cups. Next up we get the waistband. Mark on either side where a half is and mark where a quarter is on both sides using your chalk. Once that's done, place your cups on your waistband facing the right side downwards. So the right sides should both be facing each other and pin so that the bottom of the cup matches the top of the waistband. And then sew this onto your bikini. Now get the 2 small squares we mentioned earlier, because it's time to make the eyelets. Mark on your fabric where you want the eyelets to sit, and I would suggest putting 2 eyelets on each side. Once you've added the eyelets, you can use the fabric de-stitcher to get rid of the fabric from the inside. Then place them on your waistband. Make sure to place them at the top and place them 1 centimetre from the edge of the waistband, as we'll be sewing that later. At this point, we're going to fold everything in on itself, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky, so it may take some time to make sure it works. Pin it all together and make sure everything is inside, and then sew it closed. It should resemble a sausage. Once it's sewn, the next stage is to undo part of your stitching. At this point, you want to make sure it's not on the small square with the eyelets, and you also want to make sure it's not in the cup. So you really need to feel around to where the open space is. Then bring your fabric so the right side is on the outside. The next stage is to sew closed the gap that you just made when you cut open the fabric. This shouldn't take too long and it should be relatively easy to see it. You're almost done at this point, so make sure the eyelets are attached well and get your waist string that we mentioned earlier. You add the waist string inside the eyelets that should still be open, and voila, you now have a bikini top. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you feel inspired and confident to tackle this project. If you found this tutorial helpful, please consider following, liking, and commenting your favourite style of bikini in the comments, because maybe I'll make that next. Anyway, happy sewing guys, and I hope to see your future projects. I can't wait.